What is the second oldest building in Glasgow? It's not this one. And what happened right here that changed the course of British history? Find out now in this episode of Astonishing Glasgow. If you know anything about Scottish history, you'll have heard of Mary Queen of Scots. Born in Linlithgow Palace in 1542, how did she become a Glaswegian? And what is her story within the city? Well, her life was a long and eventful one, which would take hours to tell in detail. And there are plenty of movies and books which can do that far better than yours truly. So I'll just start at 1565, when she was 23 years old. She'd returned to Scotland after her first husband, Francis II, the King of France, had died of an ear infection. In 1565, she began courting Lord Darnley, which brings us to Crookston Castle. The lands of the Crookston estate lie in the very southwest edge of the city, and only became part of Glasgow in 1926 as the city expanded. There has been a castle on this site since 1170, when Norman Lord Robert Crock was granted deeds by David I of Scotland. No relation. The name Crookston comes from the Gaelic for a small knoll, or Duncrook. The castle we see today dates from the 1400s, when John Stewart of Darnley had his stone castle built. It took a right beating in 1489, when the Earl of Lennox rebelled against King James IV. This didn't go down very well, so James IV sent in his troops, along with Mons Meg, the Canon, to teach him a lesson. The dirty wee rascal soon gave up when the west end of his castle was destroyed, and Mons Meg was wheeled all the way back to Edinburgh. There were a few more sieges on the castle during its lifetime, but in quieter times, Henry Stewart, Lord Darnley, was said to have come here to woo his future wife, Mary Queen of Scots. They would tour the estate on horseback, and according to legend, this sycamore tree that stands around 2 miles from the castle in Darnley is where Mary nursed Lord Darnley back to health after a short illness. It was also a convenient place to pick up messages and a Maccadees on the way back to the castle, although I'm not sure if the Stewarts and the MacDonalds would go down too well. Anyway, it must have worked like a charm, as it was below a yew tree in the grounds of the castle that Henry and Mary would become engaged. Spoiler alert, the romance didn't last, but the castle survived as a ruin until 1757, when it became the property of the Maxwells of Pollock. The Maxwells partially restored the castle in 1847 to honour Queen Victoria when she visited the city. Now, Sir John Stirling Maxwell was pivotal in the formation of the National Trust for Scotland, and the very first building to fall under its care is Crookston Castle, which was donated to the Trust in 1934. It hadn't yet finished its role as a defensive structure, however. During the Second World War, the castle was once more called into battle as an anti-aircraft watchtower, which explains the metal stairways and concrete floors that give access to the roof of Glasgow's second oldest building. That's right, it's the second oldest building in Glasgow, after Glasgow Cathedral. If you have the time, come and pay the castle a visit. It's free to enter, just check the opening times, and you can climb right up to the top. Some of the people who have already been here include Rabbie Burns and Sir Walter Scott. They both mention Crookston Castle in their works, but Sir Walter Scott makes a claim in his novel The Abbot in 1820 that Mary Queen of Scots watched the Battle of Langside from a tree beneath this castle. A bold claim that even today, with good weather and a 30x zoom on my camera, is completely impossible. There is, however, another castle in Glasgow which claims to have hosted Mary while she watched the battle, but for that we need to travel just over 4 miles east of here. Now, while I change location, Please hit that like and subscribe button to help me grow my channel. And don't forget to treat yourself to a sticker, cap, t-shirt or hoodie in the Astonishing Glasgow Spreadshirt shop. All the links are down below. In the time it has taken to reach Cathart, on the city's south side, the area where I grew up, Mary's story has moved on another year. And would you believe, another husband. She's now married to James Hebburn of Bothwell, and it is thought that James was the man who orchestrated the demise of Lord Darnley, who was murdered in February 1567 when his residence was blown up and his body was found in his garden. Now, James Hebburn of Bothwell sounds like a right wrongin'. He abducted and raped Mary to lay his claim to the throne, and after divorcing his first wife just 12 days earlier, Mary was forced to marry him, and it was not a happy marriage. Now, her marriage to James was also very unpopular with the Earls of Scotland. She was denounced as an adulteress, and she was forced to abdicate the crown in favour of her son, the then 1-year-old James. She was imprisoned at Lochleven Castle, and James Bothwell fled to Denmark, but with the help of George Douglas, whose brother owned Lochleven Castle, Mary escaped and raised an army of 6,000 men. The plan was to march to London to seek Queen Elizabeth's help to regain her throne, but she didn't get very far. The army of the Earl of Moray, who was Mary's half-brother and now in control of Scotland through Mary's son James, cut off her escape right here in what is now the south side of Glasgow in May 1568. Mary's forces were outnumbered and at a major disadvantage. Murray's forces occupied the high ground, right up the hill behind the library, next to the National Tyres garage, but Mary's army were stranded at the bottom of the hill in swampy land. At the time of the battle, it was said that Mary was watching on from Court Now, right here in Cathart, and at the top of the hill there is a marker stone on this location with her royal cipher and the date of the battle. But just like Walter Scott's account of Mary watching the battle from Crookston Castle, there are problems with this account. A few hundred metres from this location stands Cathart Castle, or at least it did. It seems incredible that this medieval castle, which dated back to the 1400s, would have been demolished by mechanical diggers as recently as 1980. It's so recent that I can remember seeing the castle as I walked past it to get to nursery school, and my dad was able to take these pictures before it disappeared. The problem was that the castle had been abandoned in the 18th century. The Semple family built a new home, Cathart House, right here in 1740, and the castle was left empty. Stones were then taken for use elsewhere, the roof was removed, and the sand-filled walls slowly became saturated, leading to a collapse in 1980. The building was now unsafe, and after being purchased by Glasgow City Council in 1927 along with Lynn Park, it was their decision to demolish the remaining walls for safety reasons. Now, as stories go, it does seem like a perfect place for Mary to have camped during the Battle of Langside, but there are a few major problems with this account. Firstly, the Semples who occupied the castle and owned the land were supporters of Mary's enemies, and as such would have captured her and imprisoned her in the castle. The other major flaw of this account is the lack of view of battlefield. It's thought that the idea of Mary being here is no more than a Victorian romanticism. The only clue to her real location during the battle was a letter which said that Mary watched from a hill to the south of the battlefield, which would make Prospect Hill a far more likely vantage point, but why let details get in the way of a good story? Either way, it didn't end well for Mary. Spoiler alert, after fleeing, she was thrown into custody at Carlisle Castle on the 16th of May. She was moved south and put on trial for treason, but protested that as a foreign queen she had never been an English subject and therefore could not be convicted of treason. On February the 1st, 1587, Elizabeth signed Mary's death warrant, and 7 days later at Fotheringay Castle, she knelt on a cushion, placed her head on a block, and after 3 blows from the executioner, her head was severed and held aloft, the executioner calling, "God save the Queen." Her request to be buried in France was refused by Elizabeth, and she was buried in Peterborough Castle in 1587. In 1612, when her son James VI was king, he had her remains exhumed and moved to Westminster Abbey, where she rests in a tomb opposite Queen Elizabeth to this very day. The events of May the 13th, 1568 certainly left a mark on the British Crown and in Glasgow. This part of the city is still called Battlefield, after the Battle of Langside which happened on these lands. The events are marked locally in 2 places. The residents of Valeview Terrace and Prospect Hill Road now have this date in history honoured by the gateway above their bin lane and a plaque to the right. And at the top of the hill there is the Battlefield Monument. Erected in 1887 to a design by Alexander Skirving, a friend of Alexander Greek Thomson. Skirving's design was chosen ahead of those by 11 other architects. It features thistles, roses and fleur-de-lis to mark her times in Scotland, England and France. During its construction, the monument plans, newspapers of the time and a copy of Sir Walter Scott's novel The Abbot were buried below the pedestal in a time capsule. So maybe now you will know why the monument stands in the middle of the roundabout. You will know why Battlefield got its name, and you will go and climb to the top of Crookston Castle. Thank you very much for watching this episode of Astonishing Glasgow. If you have enjoyed my content, please hit that like and subscribe button. It really does boost my channel. If you want to help support me make more episodes of Astonishing Glasgow, hit that super thanks button. Every penny helps, and these are the supporters who left a donation after the last video. Remember to go and treat yourself to some merch over on the Spread Shop page. Get in touch through the comments or via the social media feeds. All the links are down below where you need them. Thank you very much again, and I will see you next time in Astonishing Glasgow. Right, I'm away for a Bloody Mary. See y'all.